Hi, friends. I'm a Global Methodist Elder, and one of the series that I've chosen to do is to interview the leaders of different conferences, not just in the United States, but also abroad. It is the Global Methodist Church, and there are conferences outside of the continental U.S. that are every bit as important as American conferences. That's something that in the United Methodist Church was ostensibly true, but not reflected always in our polity or the way that the UMC did business. I'm very invested in the Global Methodist Church truly, authentically being global, not being American centric. And what that means is having conversations with non Americans, people who have a very different cultural legacy, people who share in the same Christ, but don't always have the same presuppositions. And so, to that end, I've already spoken with Reverend Guillem Correa in Spain. And then today, I'm very honored to be joined by Reverend, it's Dr., I believe, Topalski, Daniel Topalski. And so, Reverend Dr. Topalski, thank you very much for joining me today. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine, and thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you today.
Yes, sir. Well, it's a wonderful thing to be able to speak from thousands of miles away and to have an audience of people who are excited about the project of the Global Methodist Church. And for people who don't know, the impression that we've already heard about you in the West, whether or not people remember, whenever the Global Methodist Church launched, your region of the United Methodist
Mhm.
Church instantly worked to join the Global Methodist Church. You were the first conference to seek affiliation with the Global Methodist Church. There was already a scheduled annual conference where I assume you, but also many others, took the floor of the annual conference, forced a motion through to join the Global Methodist Church, and made a very loud statement in favor of leaving the United Methodist Church, joining the Global Methodist Church. I admired your region's clarity about where you belonged. So I wanted to start perhaps talking about who you are and some of your personal history in Methodism and why it is that you've joined the Global Methodist Church. And then after that, I would like to have you recount that story of so strongly moving towards the Global Methodist Church. So
Mm.
tell me and my audience a little bit about you and your history in Methodism.
Okay, I'm already 48 years old, and I'm first generation Methodist. My wife is fourth generation, but I'm first generation Methodist.
Mm,
And when I became Christian in 1991, in my city, birth city, there was no active Methodist church. It was closed. During the communist times, it was transformed, the building was transformed into the puppet theater. So the only active and vibrant Protestant church at that moment was the Pentecostal church.
mm,
So I joined this church, but I was not completely happy, searching all the time for something better as a spiritual home for me. And when they finally decided to restore the Methodist Church, it was in 1995. I was hesitant to join because it was a gathering of people from different Christian traditions, not exactly Methodist. So I didn't see any big difference
mm.
between what I have in the Pentecostal church and this new group of people. So I finally decided to join the Methodist Church in 2001. Uh, and I was almost immediately invited by the superintendent back then to become a chair of the church council. And I said, okay, it's too early. I'd like to explore
Hmm.
this new environment for me because everything was under construction. So I expected to see very clear Methodist features, but they were not present still. Because for Methodists, new Methodists in Bulgaria, it was not clear what that name really means.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So it was time to really to rediscover somehow the Methodist identity. And in my birth city, there were almost no Methodists alive anymore. because during the communist times, they were joined by the Pentecostals in order to preserve the parsonage of the Methodist Church, because the communist authorities all the time counted the membership, and if there are less than 10 people, they will take also the parsonage as they took the church. So it was very important for the small bunch of Methodists to invite other Christians in order to preserve the last, Methodist building in the city. So it was very difficult at the beginning, really, to recover authentic Methodist identity. So I was not very happy at the beginning. But there was a challenge, to work for this process of rebuilding. And because of my legal background, I was invited also to serve as a legal advisor for the church, because during this period of time, we had a lot of cases of restitution of church property back to the church. So I was invited to work for the church as a legal advisor and also as a lay preacher at the very beginning. So after a while, I said, okay, for myself, I already read a lot of theology. I'm interested in church history and dogmatic theology and all that. So I said, okay, it's time to formalize all that knowledge, to go to the university, to study theology, and to receive, a proper certification about my knowledge. So I went to the Orthodox theological faculty, because Orthodox theological faculties are the only recognized by the state, theological institutions. There were some Protestant attempts to form some sort of educational theological institutions, but they were very weak back then, not recognized by the state. So I went to the Orthodox theological faculty. I did my master's with them, and I was invited to start my period as a probationer minister. I did it. I was moved in a new city, in a new congregation with my wife and my daughter. So after the end of the probationary period, I was ordained and immediately appointed superintendent, which was a surprise for me. But, in our very tiny, small minority annual conference, our bishop didn't have enough choices to make. So probably back then I was the most appropriate, I don't know, choice, but I was invited immediately to become a superintendent, and I did, after my predecessor, who served as a superintendent for almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Superintendents here are very different, because you are like a head of the church.
Okay.
CEO, legal representative, employer, everything, administrator, spiritual leader.
Wow.
Because the bishop is far, far away, in Switzerland, in Zurich, visiting once a year, probably 2 times. If we are lucky. So the bishop is far, far away, and the superintendent is usually acting as a real vicar.
What year were you appointed as DS?
Sorry?
In what year were you appointed as superintendent?
2011, I was appointed as DS, and I served before that a year as a chair of the church council, and there was no superintendent because the bishop needed some time to decide, after this long reign for 20 years of my predecessor, who to appoint. So I was finally appointed. This was not my idea. I said, okay, I will serve as a chair of the church council for a year and then back to my pastoral ministry, because this was my idea, That's why I studied theology. And when I was approached by the bishop and asked, okay, I would like to appoint you as a superintendent, but I'm giving you a choice to be only a superintendent or superintendent and pastor. And I said, okay, superintendent and pastor sounds much better, because I'm too young to be only a church administrator. So I decided to continue to pastor a church and also to be a superintendent. So I was superintendent for almost 11 years for the United Methodist Church. And in 2022, the bishop decided to replace me. And on 31st of March, just the day before our resolution for leaving the United Methodist Church, he appointed a new colleague as a superintendent. So I served, yes, 11 years as a superintendent of the United Methodist Church and the Bishop Patrick Schrijf. So we had very good relationships, and yeah, it was painful that we ended our relationships in that way. But me personally and the church council did all necessary things to inform the bishop in advance about our intentions. So he was not taken by surprise. It was not like that. We sent the project for our proposal for the motion, and also the understanding of paragraph 572, I think, at least a month in advance. So he had enough time to prepare himself how to deal with this surprising motion in a country like Bulgaria. And I underline surprising because, Bulgarian annual conference was very much financially dependent on Central Conference finances. So probably many people from the Central Conference didn't expect such a motion to come from our annual conference. So it was surprising, but technically speaking, it was not a surprise for the bishop, because we did what's necessary to inform him in advance and to have a very transparent understanding of what we are planning to do as an annual conference. And back then we were together with the Romanians.
Right.
They had only 3 churches. So it was a mixed annual conference, Bulgaria-Romania annual conference. And I also served as a superintendent for Romanian part for 8 years. So it was an interesting part of my life, traveling, teaching, organizing seminars for lay preachers and local pastors. It was interesting enough. But, after our common decision, when 100% of all delegates, clergy and lay, voted in favor, Romanians decided that it probably it's too early for them to withdraw from the United Methodist Church, and they decided to stay. So only the Bulgarian part of the annual conference really left the United Methodist Church. And we did it a month before the official launch of the Global Methodist Church, April 1st, 2022. And the decision was effective May 1st. And all the time, the Church Council, myself, we underlined that our idea is not to become autonomous Methodist Church, but effective May 1st to become part of a new Methodist denomination. So we did all these things in a very clear conscience that we are acting on the basis of the church law of the United Methodist Church, and on the basis, I believe, of the practice of the Judicial Council back then, because after our decision, they decided to close the door. And to be very explicit, that annual conferences, especially in the United States, cannot do the same thing like Bulgarians first. And second, all the annual conferences outside of the United States have only one option, and this is paragraph 572. For me, this is not the right interpretation of this paragraph, because the focus is for those annual conferences outside of the United States which try to become autonomous, affiliated, or something like that. This was not our intention. And so we did what we did on the basis of our understanding of the Book of Discipline and the practice of the Judicial Council. And this practice dramatically changed in the next few months after our decision, not in a very good way. And you know that what is available as an option for this affiliation in the United States for the local churches is not available for the local churches outside of the United States.
Yes, when
And
Bishop Bickerton started making those decisions without even presenting it to the Judicial Council, I reported on that openly. I think that's a clear and present evidence of bad faith in the United Methodist Church, or self-interest at least. But I've been very well, and I'm not the only one. The entire conservative caucus within the United Methodist Church and the Global Methodist Church is dismayed at central conferences in the United Methodist Church being robbed of any ability to leave. For Bishop Bickerton to say outright, that is not a disciplinary provision. They cannot do it. The only provision is paragraph 572, which is very arduous and largely at the mercy of the United Methodist leadership. My understanding was, okay, so correct my understanding on the annual conference session that Bulgaria, Romania had. You were assembled. The bishop knew that it was your intention to have a group vote to disaffiliate and join the Global Methodist Church. It finally came time to facilitate that vote. The bishop called it out of order. The conference body insisted. Finally, the bishop called an end to the session. He walked out, but everybody else remained. A new chair was designated who called for the vote. And so so then at that point, my understanding was that the denomination determined that because the bishop had closed the session, any decisions made afterwards were not legitimate, and that they then compelled Bulgarian leadership to go through the paragraph 572 process. Did I misunderstand what took place?
You know, yes, you understand it very, very, very well. You know, it's a big problem for me when a single person, the bishop, can stop the proceedings of the entire body. And in the Book of Discipline, the annual conference is the basic body of the church. I think not the bishops, but the annual conference. And if a single person tried to stop what annual conference has to do, that's not right. You know, that's why we said, okay, we will vote for the suspensions of the rules, and despite the fact that the bishop decide to, to go out or to even to stay at the conference session room, we will vote for replacing him officially, and only for this agenda item to have a different presiding officer. To give enough space for the annual conference to exercise its rights. So we did it like that. And what is, I think, what was the advantage of our situation was that the national law of Bulgaria allows it. Because if we go to change our registration with the Sofia Regional Court, they will pay no attention what the Book of Discipline provisions are. They will try to review if the provisions of the Bulgarian religious law were followed.
So let me put that in my own words. The Bulgarian government does not care what the United Methodist Book of Discipline says. So when you made your decision, you were not very concerned about the United Methodist Church finding it
absolutely.
Okay, very good. Go ahead.
Absolutely. It was absolutely not our concern. And, our case in front of the Judicial Council was prolonged because first they found that the bishop didn't ask what is necessary to be asked. They corrected him, so everything to be successful and victorious at the end. But it was not our concern anymore because all the changes were registered in the National Court, and all the changes were approved, the changes of our bylaws. And in the preamble of the bylaws, it's written that we are part of the Global Methodist Church, full stop. and probably the president pro tempore or the bishop of the Global Methodist Church is responsible for the oversight of the Bulgarian church. So this was the end of the story, and our bishop was very, very much aware that the situation in the Bulgarian framework is like that.
So
You know,
did
but
Bulgarian
he
leadership
did what's necessary to be done.
so did Bulgarian leadership ever go through the paragraph 572 process?
No, no.
Okay.
We decided that this paragraph is not our paragraph because we are not aiming to become an autonomous church or
So
affiliated or,
so
you know.
is the United Methodist Church still in any way trying to make claim over Bulgarian
No,
churches?
no, that it's not possible. Legally, it's not
Well,
possible.
I'm sure you're correct, but if the United Methodist Church gives up on laying claim to Bulgarian churches, former churches, then that sets a precedent for other United Methodist churches and other central conferences, which is if they simply collectively walk out, there's nothing the denomination can do. So I think we just saw Kenya just do the same thing. Have you read about that?
Slovaks did it before Kenya.
Yes.
Our Slovak brothers and sisters did it last year, you know, following our good example. And it was, again, like it was in Bulgaria. They went to the Ministry of Culture because this institution is responsible for the religious institution and their registration. And they ask, okay, are there any problem if we do that right now? And they said, no, no problem. We care about the Slovak national religious institutions. We don't care about other stuff. So they did it. And it was again clear for the bishop and the central conference that they cannot do anything to overturn this decision or to challenge it legally.
Yeah. Well, I'm very happy for you and for the leadership and the people in Bulgaria. It's a wonderful thing to be free in that way. So I am interested to learn about the nature and flavor of the Bulgarian church. But before that, I want to come back to your personal story because
Yeah.
your leadership is quite important. For a time, you said your awareness of what makes Methodism distinct, you didn't know because a lot of people there didn't know. It wasn't important. But you've since done your own study, extensive theological study. So I'm wondering what it is about Methodism that you have found worthy of promoting whenever it would be easy to join another Christian movement. What is it about Methodism that you find worthy or potentially promising for your cultural context and for the world?
What's important for me when we talk about Methodism is that, you know, usually we Methodists like to say, okay, we prefer to be a movement, not an institution. That's great. But Methodism was not a movement from awakening event to awakening event. Methodism was a very serious, structured, you know, type of work, you know, out of the awakening
Sure.
as a renewal movement, but it was not a travel from awakening event to the awakening event. Because
When you say that, you
Mr.
mean the Great Awakening, first Great Awakening
Not
to the
only,
second?
not
Yeah.
only, you know, nowadays people are going, you know, to different awakening events, you know,
Revivals and yeah.
you know, the revival events. And
Yeah.
for me, it's not a problem. I know that every one of us needs motivation and new inspiration to do his work. But for me, the emphasis on Methodism is, you know, how to become a disciplined follower or disciple of Jesus Christ in your daily life.
Okay.
How you can find God in your everyday life. So the big topic of sanctification, but this topic is in the framework of your daily life. And Mr. Wesley provided a lot of different kind of means for the Methodists to apply this in their daily life. So this is very important for me, the emphasis on sanctification and also the emphasis of our personal responsibility. You know, I have a very favorite quotation from one Wesley's sermon.
Do it.
And I think, this is my opinion, it's a very good summary of the best of Methodist theology. And this quotation is, first, God works, therefore you can work.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly,
Mm-hmm.
God works, therefore you must work.
Ooh.
And the ending is very important. You must be workers together with him, otherwise he will cease working. So this is very good. You know, without the gift, you cannot do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But having a gift, you're responsible to do everything. This is absolutely important, absolutely crucial. And, you know, this is very good and creative,
Mm-hmm.
I think, biblically founded resolution of all the debates during the Reformation time about faith and, good works, about the human will and grace. This is a very good balanced resolution of all these things. And this balance is very close to what we have in the Orthodox theological tradition.
Right? Yeah.
And you know that Wesley himself was a big fan of some Orthodox authors, especially the Desert Fathers,
Mm-hmm.
for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this tradition was very important in the formation of Mr. Wesley's theology and also the theology of his brother, because in my opinion, when we are talking about early Methodism, the heavy emphasis on John is not a good approach. We have to approach both brothers in their dialogue, fights, disagreements
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
This working dialogue is the best definition of the early Methodist theology. Not only John, but, wonderful hymns of Charles. Because if you read the hymns of Charles, you can see that the poetic theology can say much more than the theology which is written in prose.
I had
That's absolutely clear.
I had an Eastern Orthodox friend for a time who acknowledged that the best Christmas hymn ever written was written by Charles Wesley. It had the most.
Damn, good for him.
Right? Yes. Well, so it became. You've said a couple of things about Methodism that I think would surprise a number of people. One, an earnest defense of Methodism as a disciplined, ordered institution, not at the exclusion
not
of
exactly the institution, but all the forms of disciplined Christian life. Methodist classes, bands, special groups, and so on,
Mm-hmm.
which were part of the Methodist DNA. And when they disappeared in the church life, Methodism was not Methodism anymore, in fact.
Ooh.
Because we became much more than all other evangelicals.
Mm-hmm.
And what is also important to be underlined is a very special place of Holy Communion in the Methodist spirituality, because it's absolutely not typical for renewal movement to have so heavy stress on Eucharistic theology. But what you have with John and Charles, it's a very heavy stress on regular participation in the Holy Communion. And you know that even for Charles and John, it was not about regular, it was about constant communion.
Ooh, yes.
Because according to his sermon, it's a duty,
Mm-hmm.
a constant communion.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of living. It's not once a month or 4 times a year, whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
the crucial importance of the Holy Communion as a central celebration of Christian people gathered together in
Mm-hmm.
Christ's name with him present, not somewhere else, but present. So this is very important combination, and also the Holy Communion was one of the most important means of grace recommended by Mr. Wesley to early Methodists, and they gathered and crowded Anglican parishes, and the priests were shocked and amazed because they didn't see these people before, but they overcrowded their parishes to take Holy Communion on the regular basis, which was not common practice of this era.
Mm-hmm. So you've stood up for organization and discipline in an era where at least American audiences are quite undisciplined and don't want to be disciplined. You've made the case that Methodism is not contained to the work and personality only of John, but also that Charles occupies.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you've made a strong statement now that authentic Methodism ended whenever mandatory participation in the class meeting ended. I heard you right when you said that. So,
oh yeah, it was a great problem for the Methodist Church.
So
I think we lost some of the key elements of our DNA when these class meetings became not so popular anymore, and the people preferred to become anonymous, not open, and not ready to be mutually accountable.
I could not agree with you more. I have been trying to facilitate a conversation publicly about the essential nature of Methodist, what things are essential to be Methodist, what things are not essential. I am of the mind that the class meeting is one of the fundamental, foundational things about being Methodist, that if the Global Methodist Church does not reclaim, then it really is failing to reclaim the Methodist heritage. So it sounds like you and I are in agreement about this.
Yeah, because what we see right now and what we saw in Asbury and other places, these awakening moments, that's great. But this is a clear reminder that we have to do something serious afterwards. This is not the end of the story. This is not the end of the journey. We have to provide for all these people, or new followers or enthusiastic people, very structured forms for daily discipleship. Otherwise, the enthusiasm will, go out step by step.
Another Methodist reformer preacher that was very powerful in speech was George Whitefield, and
we know about him. This was his problem.
Yes, and he confessed this publicly, that he would get people riled up, but he didn't put them into the class meeting. So he would come back later and find them twice the children of hell that they had been when he first came to them. He said that their fellowship was a rope of sand without the class meeting.
Absolutely, it was. And Mr. Wesley was not so influential, not so powerful as public speaker. But his genius was completely different. What will we do with all these people afterwards? We have to take care about them. We have to be very responsible about them, forming communities, forming classes, and forming bands. And it's very interesting that classes started for the very practical reason, to collect the money and to pay back the debt,
right?
And to realize, okay, this is a very practical thing, but we can use it for pastoral oversight, and we can do, very powerful things with that.
The thing I love about that story, Daniel, is I'm sorry, I called you Daniel. Can I call you Daniel?
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, brother.
Absolutely.
The thing I love about that story is the first time that they sent out the class leader to collect money, they came back and reported that they found several people drunk at home or abusing their wives. And leaders today would say, oh, we need to stop this. But what John Wesley said is, we need to do this more because we are exposing the hypocrisy of our disciples. And that is a loving thing to do. And so that is what I wish that we had the integrity to reclaim, is insisting on holiness among people who want to call themselves Methodist.
Holiness, but social holiness, communal holiness, not social in the modern sense of this word. And this is very important, because it's not only about me. I'm responsible for everyone, and everyone is responsible for all others. And we have to reclaim this bond in our congregations. And the way to reclaim it is to do it first in small groups, to live it out in small groups in a very concrete situation with very concrete persons, with very concrete personal problems, and to dealing with all that. Because, there is a big thing and problem in Protestantism,
Hmm.
and this is the lack of space and form for confession. We
Okay.
don't like Roman Catholic type of
Right.
thing, or
Yes.
Orthodox type of thing. Okay, we prefer to confess everything to God Himself. He is
Yes.
invisible. We can say Him everything in a very easy way,
Uh-huh.
and we have this very light understanding of sin, very light understanding of its consequences, and very light understanding of forgiveness.
Hmm.
And we have to facilitate forms where this practice of confession in a more collective way,
Hmm.
for sure, like it was in the primitive church, to be recovered. Otherwise, we will continue to encourage this very light understanding of sin
Mm.
and repentance and
Hmm.
forgiveness, which is, I think, a synonymous of cheap grace if
Yes.
we take seriously the words of Dieter Bonhoeffer.
Yes, very good. Yes. I wish that I could talk to you for 10 hours. I'm enjoying hearing you talk very much.
Probably, probably next time. And when I decided to start my PhD studies,
Hmm.
the only opportunity was again the Orthodox Theological Faculty, the same university when I did my law degree.
Hmm.
So I went for a meeting to my future father professor and ask him, okay, it's time for me to write something positive about my own tradition, because usually in the Orthodox Theological Faculty, if you write something about non-Orthodox tradition,
Hmm.
you have to do it from Orthodox critical point of view. So very schizophrenic. Being Methodist, criticizing my own tradition from Orthodox point of view. So probably for scholarly purpose, this is a good thing,
Uh-huh. Sure.
how to criticize yourself from other traditions point
Very
of view.
sure.
But I
Okay.
said, okay, I'm not interested in doing that. So if you allowed for the first time in Bulgaria to do something positive about my tradition, I will prepare myself for the entering exams, because we have entering exams.
If you could give me one
Uh,
second, I would
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
I would like to try and give my version of history so that my audience will
Okay,
understand.
okay, okay.
So in the year 1058, there was a schism between the Western Church, which is today referred to as the Roman Catholic Church, and the
Yeah,
Eastern Church, which is in the West called the Eastern Orthodox Church. Your region, Bulgaria, was in the East. And so that
yes,
region developed in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, which for
absolutely,
almost 1,000 years in that region, the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, that's one family among the larger network of Orthodox
absolutely.
churches.
They call it the sister churches.
Very good. And so the Eastern Orthodox Church has not one pope at the top, but there is a patriarch at the head of each of the sister churches.
Yeah, national church.
And so there,
Patriarchs are on the top.
okay. And so there's a the Bulgarian Orthodox Church maintained throughout the Ottoman occupation. It
Yeah,
also maintained barely through the communist reign through the USSR that took over all
yeah,
that land. Uh, the United Methodist Church only just barely survived. The Eastern Orthodox Church also very much struggled. Communism is inherently hostile towards religion and towards anything with history that stands against the spirit of revolution.
absolutely.
But after the fall of the Iron Curtain and the end of the USSR and Bulgarians reclaiming their homeland and their culture and their country, there has not been a sort of American flourishing, equal flourishing of all Christian traditions. Rather, there has been a preference towards the Bulgarian Orthodox Church that is by far the majority Christian faith, and they have the gears of power. They don't chase the rest of other Christians out. However, they do things like this, where they have control of this academic institution, where they kind of compel you to reflect negatively on your own tradition. But the question I had for you, and it ties into where you were going, is there's clearly Eastern Orthodox influence on Methodism, on John Wesley, the concept of
Oh yeah,
theosis and entire sanctification, the sacramental
absolutely.
theology, the importance of constant communion. The Eastern Orthodox faith also makes very normal daily practices that redirect an individual in their normal daily lives towards Christ
Mhm.
Jesus. So
True.
so there are many overlaps where if that were the most important thing, then you would have no problem just being Bulgarian Orthodox and going that way. But
Mhm.
you've chosen to maintain your affiliation as a distinct tradition, Methodism, which is much smaller, much weaker, not at
Oh
all
yeah.
popular yet. And so there's a
Uh,
reason for that that you're about to tell me.
yeah. Orthodoxy is still the main religious presence in our country, but most of Bulgarians, almost 80% of Bulgarians claim that they're Orthodox, but most of them are not active.
Hmm.
They are nominal Christians, most of them. Some of them probably enter the church only for a baptism or wedding or funeral or something like that, or
Sure.
big festival.
Yes.
We have some good trends in the last decades, new generations of priests and so on and so on. But it's important to underline that in Bulgaria still to be a Protestant or to be Christian from non-Orthodox Christian tradition, it's a strange thing, strange choice.
Hmm.
If you want to go higher in your social status or professionally or whatever, it's much better not to be religious or to be Orthodox if you're religious, but to be Protestant. It's quite strange. And for many
Hmm.
people in Bulgaria, non-Orthodox Christian churches are not churches at all. They're cults, they're sects of some sort,
Sure. Yeah.
probably dangerous, you know. And sometimes when I have a conversation with Bulgarians and I share, okay, I'm pastor of the Methodist Church, and they say, okay, we are going to our Christian church. So I said, okay, we are Christians as well,
Uh-huh.
but it's very difficult to explain that. And when Methodist missionaries came for the first time, Bulgaria was under the Ottoman rule.
Hmm.
It was 1856-57, so mid 19th century. Uh, for Bulgarians were very difficult to understand what's going on,
Hmm.
and they were very suspicious, not very friendly.
Hmm.
So it was very, very difficult for the missionaries to start their work. And when they came, it's interesting. They told that they can bring the Protestant Reformation in in the Orthodox Church.
Hmm.
They came with that notion,
Okay.
but they realized that it's not possible at all.
Mm.
To bring something like that in Orthodoxy, the development could come only from the church inside,
Hmm.
not from outside. It's not possible at all.
Mm.
So they were a little bit ignorant about what the Orthodoxy really is.
Hmm.
But after a while, they said, okay, we have to organize our own churches because it's not possible to work for the reformation of the Orthodox Church. But why I decided not to go with the majority
Hmm.
of Bulgarians, what I really like in the Protestant churches and in the Methodist Church is, uh, this sense of being real part of community, a real part of community of brothers and sisters, and you are not anonymous.
Hmm.
You're practicing your religion with your faith. Some people don't like the term religion. I like it. I have no problems with it,
Uh-huh.
but
Uh-huh.
some people have it, I know. So practicing your faith with all others in a very collective way, this is for me very, very important. uh, and Orthodoxy is currently in a situation of crisis because many people are going to the Orthodox Church, but they are not real parishes, real parish life. there are exceptions, with the new generations of priests. But before that, it was a very anonymous way to practice your faith. You go and you stay during the liturgy, and you light your, a candle, and you pray. And you can even go when the liturgy is not going on. So to be completely anonymous in an empty church, it's not the type of Christianity that I'm attracted to. But some people prefer it. But this is not Orthodox, originally. Authentic Orthodoxy is about, parish life, about interacting, about doing things together and all that. It will recover one day in Bulgaria. I hope so, because we cannot do the work of the Orthodox Church. That's absolutely clear. We are a tiny minority church here. We have our part of the work, but I hope that they will recover sooner or later. And the current situation of the Orthodox Church is very much a result of the pressure during the communist times, because the communist authorities did their best to groom their own generations of clergy and bishops. Out of this, grooming of their own and suppressing all others, so putting them in prison or in special camps or killing them without any sentence and any legal procedures in the first months after 9th of September 1944, where they came in power with the help of the Red Army. All this was a very big blow, but I hope that they will recover one way or another. But this is not my own tradition. I prefer to be part of something completely different, and also to have more direct access to Christ himself, not with too many mediations,
When you talk about too many mediations,
yes, a bunch of saints who are mediating your connection with Christ. It's a little bit too much for me.
That's been my main hang up. My wife and I have been very drawn to Eastern Orthodoxy for some time. Over the course of several years, we've worshipped a handful of times in a couple of Eastern Antiochian Orthodox churches. And what we've noticed about them is funny, because here in America, where Protestantism is the majority religion, the Protestantism is largely anonymous and consumer-based and impersonal. But when we go to these Antiochian Orthodox churches, they're very intimate fellowships with families involved, inculcating their children much better than Protestants, taking their faith much more seriously than Protestants. I wonder if that's the nature of a minority Christian sect as opposed to a larger culturally dominant thing. I really wanted to take seriously the notion of potentially converting to Eastern Orthodoxy because of its cultural proximity to Christ. It just seems, but the main place we went to worship has Mary at the top, not Jesus, not God. It has a depiction of Mary, and then there are saints everywhere, and people are going and kissing them and bowing down to them, and I just can't. I cannot do it. I can't do it. If there was a version of Eastern Orthodoxy that I have no problem with the saints or with angels, but
I don't have.
I cannot bow down to them. I cannot pray to them. And I know they say it's not worship. They say it's veneration.
Absolutely.
I just can't.
The decision of the Seventh Ecumenical Council is clear for me theologically, that the practice of this is, not according to the decision and not according to the theological understanding, and it's problematic for me.
Yes.
It's not a proper understanding of the place of the saints in the life of the church.
Yes.
I understand that the church is something much bigger than our present gathering here, the people who are alive, but it's something really, really much bigger. I can live without, and I think this is very important to understand.
Yes.
But when this practice of relations to the saints is not properly executed, I have a big problem with it.
Yes, yes. It's so interesting to me, and I hope this is not lost on my audience, that you and I have not spoken before today.
Oh no.
We have very different upbringings in different cultures, and yet as you and I speak about our relationship with the Lord and walking together in the Holy Spirit, immediately it's very clear that you and I are of the same. Perhaps there are differences between us, but I feel a kinship with you that I just think is so remarkable. And so I hope that my audience understands. I'm not being false in any way. I really am genuinely enjoying the connection you and I have. But I also need to make room. I need to take time and energy to understand how it is that the Bulgarian church is not the American church, that the sensibilities of Bulgarian Methodists are not going to be the same as American Methodists. The Mid Texas Annual Conference has recently started a formal partnership with
Yeah.
the Bulgarian Conference of the Global Methodist Church. It's yes, it has finances involved, but it's not just a financial relationship. You are working in a partnership to learn from one another, grow alongside one another. I It's not only the Mid Texas Conference that is called to understand Bulgaria or non-American churches. I think we all need to take time and energy to learn about how we are not
Mhm.
the center of the world. So perhaps you could speak for a few minutes about what is, you've already spoken a little bit, the distinct influence of the Eastern Orthodox Church, but there's some ways in which the history has been different, Bulgarian culture, even before Ottoman occupation. There are a number of factors that Americans just don't know or appreciate. Could you speak for a little bit about what is different about the Bulgarian context from the American
Mm.
context?
Orthodoxy is one thing, but the other thing is that in Bulgaria is not very appropriate to speak very openly in public about your religious beliefs.
Hmm.
So when the first evangelists from the United States came and started their evangelization campaigns, for Bulgarian it was bizarre. you know, they were curious, because all these topics were forbidden. It was not allowed to speak about it. So people were curious about it, but they were absolutely not in favor the way in which all these efforts were conducted.
Hmm.
I think that we lost a lot of people at the beginning after the changes, the democratic changes, because we didn't make the necessary changes appropriate for the local context, and especially the American, evangelists, they came with their American way of doing things, stadiums, big arenas
Hmm.
in the centers of the city, and a lot of shouts, loudly music, and so on. So this was not the best way to approach the Bulgarian people. Because Bulgarian people think about the religious things like household things. You cannot discuss your household things on the street in that loudly noisy, how to say, entertainment type of way. It's absolutely inappropriate.
Okay.
Yeah, some people were attracted to it, but most of Bulgarians were not.
Okay.
So we somehow didn't manage to realize, and it was not, it was not up to us, because all these foreigners, they didn't ask us what is appropriate and what's not. They simply came and did their shows in their way.
Well,
They
surely
expected the same results like they have in America, probably.
Well, surely you're
But
aware a Western audience is going to want to immediately argue that authentic Methodism does these public displays of evangelistic appeal because of John Wesley's field preaching and becoming more vile in order to reach the least of these. What the way you talk about it, it's associated with these big crusades and Jimmy Swaggart and all these American
Yeah, at the
entertainment.
beginning it was like that.
But
Many
John,
people like these people.
so
I understand you. I understand you very well, but I
yes,
also believe that if Mr. Wesley was Bulgarian, his proceedings will be completely different.
interesting. Well, so but
There will be different in a specific way, appreciating the how to say the inner world and visities of the local people.
so would you be?
Paul was let's end at this.
Yeah.
Paul was very very fruitful in his ministry,
Mhm.
but in Athens he didn't succeed a lot
Okay.
when he started to speak about the resurrection.
Hmm.
you know
Hmm.
partly he was successful because we said, okay, we have some common things, and I can start from here.
Hmm.
But in a certain moment you're losing your audience.
Yes.
So even big servants of God, they have their failures when the context it's not absolutely appreciative to your message.
Well, and hear
And
me.
you have to adapt.
Absolutely. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I am anticipating a Western audience automatic wanting to draw
Absolutely.
back, especially
Probably.
within the Global Methodist Church, which in America at least has taken a posture of great excitement for evangelical zeal. It will surprise many to learn that not every section of the Global Methodist Church is of one mind about a public evangelism strategy that is perhaps not as exuberant or not as loud. And so
Mhm.
I personally read a book many years ago on the evangelistic strategy of the early church, which was don't do it, And yet the early church grew leaps and bounds because they publicly lived out as individuals a faith of very much integrity. So I'm
Yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah.
mind. Here, I will say this, and then you can disagree with me. But I'm of the mind that if Methodism is to survive in the long term, we need to understand that large public evangelism is actually not an essential part of the movement, but that was a byproduct of something that was helpful in an English context and then an American context. And it's not bad necessarily, it's just not essential to being Methodist.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I appreciate this evangelistic zeal of our new movement very much. But if we have to apply it here,
Hmm.
you have to go in a more person-to-person, conversation or more intimate way, a faith sharing. So all these ways of approaching the other
Hmm.
very personally, we have to encourage that way of
Yes.
doing evangelism here.
Yes.
And the life of integrity of the group, of the individuals and the group as a whole, this is the best witness that we can offer, I believe, not only in Eastern Europe, but in the United States as well. Because the enthusiasm which is coming out of the big evangelistic events is something good, but if there is no follow-up,
Hmm.
this enthusiasm will go in vain finally.
Yes.
And that's why if we have to say what is more important for Methodism, public evangelistic events or Methodist classes, I will pick up the second option.
Very good. Yes.
I
Well, and
will pick up the classes.
I wonder if
But there is no opposition between both. I have to be very clear. There is no opposition. But
Mhm,
if we are speaking about the core,
mhm.
this is the core.
Yes.
And in our context, more personal and intimate approach is applicable. In other contexts, you have to adopt. And I think Methodism in general is very adaptive. And this is another thing that we have to appreciate very much. Very adaptive. And this flexibility has to be encouraged in every area of church life. Right now we are deciding what kind of episcopacy we want to have. And some people have, we need to have a general superintendency, not residential bishops. Oh, good. Probably you have some problems with residential bishops in the past, but we all the time we had a bishop somewhere, coming once a year. And for me to have a general superintendent, it's like to call a call center to receive a service. So I have to fix an appointment. Let's call my bishop. He's somewhere in the world, probably on the moon. And I'm calling, and on the other side of the line, I'm hearing, okay, all the bishops are busy right now. So hold on, the first bishop available will answer you. So the bishop said, okay, I'm the bishop so-and-so. What's your problem? So I have to fix my appointment. Okay, I'll fix it. So I don't believe in such a episcopal oversight here.
Okay.
Probably in the United States, the general episcopacy is better.
Okay.
Here, we would like to see our bishops more frequently.
Yes.
Present.
Yes.
In person.
Yes.
So that's why I appreciate flexibility, and I believe that if really talking about global nature of the Global Methodist Church, we have to be very flexible. Not simply to say, okay, we will decide according to the American preference, because most of the delegates will be Americans. So we are afraid of having to having residential bishops anymore, because they will pay more attention to the annual conference, which are paying them. So let's be general superintendents, but not everywhere.
Yeah.
This is only an opinion. I'm not part of this working group. I'm not participating in the conversation really at the moment, but this is simply an example. And we had a conversation with Bishop Mark Webb recently in that regard. So we agree that we have to be flexible, and something which is okay in your part of the world is not okay in our part of the world.
Right. Yeah.
So let's not repeat the same mistakes like in the United Methodist Church.
Yes. Yeah, it's very important to learn lessons not just from early Methodism, but even from recent decades in the United Methodist Church. There's a reason, there are many reasons why we chose to leave, and it would be wrong for us not to rehearse those and articulate those so as to avoid reproducing those. So
absolutely,
I know that as we're coming up on an hour, and we should probably wrap up, even though there's a lot more that you and I could enjoy talking about. But this has been a good introduction, I think, to you as a representative of the leadership in Bulgaria, and to understanding what makes your context unique. I'd like to invite you at this point to talk about how it is that Global Methodists, or Methodists more broadly, can pray for you and for the Bulgarian church. What is it that we can petition the Lord about that would be of benefit to you?
That's right now we are trying to execute a 5-year plan for financial self-sufficiency, so to speak. And you mentioned this is not only about finances, about logistics. I think it's not only about finances and logistics. It's about complete renewal of our church, because the financial situation is a symptom of a much more serious disease. Because for one reason or another, I will not go in that direction further, but this culture of dependency was nurtured through the decades, and this situation made the church very inactive and creative. So when we are trying to change the way in which people are participating, it's not only the way in they're participating financially, but in their way to participate in the church life in full scale, according to their gifts and graces, not only in finances. So this is a plan really to work for the restructuring and revival of our church in every aspect of its life. And that's why we are so grateful to the Mid-Texas Annual Conference for their decision to partner with us, not only financially to reach our goal, which is a very ambitious goal, in fact, but also to work together for the renewal of our church, because we are a tiny minority church, but at the same time, I believe that we have a lot of opportunities and perspectives for further development, because there is no, how to say, non-charismatic alternative in Bulgarian Protestantism, no other serious alternative than Methodist Church right now. So it's our responsibility to really to renew our church and our efforts to reach out new people for Christ, people who will feel at home in the Methodist Church as an alternative between, Orthodox option and radical charismatic options. Because there are many Bulgarians, looking for an alternative. And I think that Methodism is so rich and wonderful tradition. We have to use all this rich treasures that we have at store, and to to be more active, more creative, to encourage our people to share their faith, and to understand their responsibility.
Very good.
Because when you're financially dependent, when someone is providing for you, your only option is to stay and obey. You are not participating really in full scale. You have no responsibility, and with no responsibility, you're an inactive participant or member of the church.
Right.
So changing the financial situation is also a way of changing everything, because you cannot simply separate financial part from so-called spiritual part. This distinction between spiritual and material is not Christian.
Okay.
It's Neoplatonic, probably, but Christian is not. The basic distinction in the Bible is between created and uncreated, not between material and spiritual.
Okay.
So everything is interconnected. That's why it's a plan also for complete renewal. And I'm very thankful to Leah Heidi Gregory, the president pro tempore of the Mid-Texas Annual Conference, and the leadership of Mid-Texas Annual Conference, that they're ready really to go in a partnership which is not focused only on transfer of finances, but a real exchange of gifts that we have.
Isn't that great? Yes.
So our main prayer need is for more strength and courage to fulfill the goals of this plan, because they are very ambitious. I know. When I started to discuss with some Americans, they said, okay, Daniel, it's too ambitious. You cannot do it. I know that it's ambitious. And they said, okay, let's add a year or two. I said, no, it's wrong way to go, because we have to keep this feeling of urgency.
Yes.
We have to do it now.
Very good.
And if I say to our people, we have 7 years, they say, oh, we'll think about it later. It's too early to think about it. No. We have 5 years, and we started September 1st already. So it's an ambitious goal after so many years of financial dependency to really to encourage and motivate our people to take their responsibility seriously. But we have already a very good signs and reactions and feedbacks from our members. But I will appreciate your prayers in that regard, because for us, it's not only a matter of finances.
Mhm.
It's a matter of vitality of our church. It's a matter of being faithful to our calling in
Yes.
this particular country, with this particular people, in this
Yeah.
particular context.
Well, it's clear that Bulgaria is under very conscientious and educated leadership, and so I think they're blessed to have you. I know that.
Only God knows.
Well, next week they're going to be deprived of you. You're flying over here, aren't you?
Oh, yes. Tuesday, I'm flying to Atlanta via Istanbul. There will be a meeting of presidents pro tempore and the bishops. And after that, there will be a meeting of the Transitional Leadership Council. So I
Perfect.
have to travel. Yeah.
Well, Atlanta is a lovely city. I hope you
I
enjoy
know.
your time. Oh, you've been there?
It's not my first time there.
Wonderful. Well, I wish I lived closer and I could swing by and meet you in person, but the Lord willing, there
Maybe
will.
next time.
Yeah, maybe next time. It'd
And
be.
where are you living, actually?
I'm in northeastern rural Oklahoma, so I would
Oh,
be at least 1,000 miles away from Atlanta,
oh
if
yeah.
not two. So,
It's a significant distance.
yes, sir. It's a big, beautiful country we live in, but
Yeah, probably.
it's a big, little beautiful country you live in Bulgaria. So, God has put you there, and I'm glad you're doing the work. And thank you for taking the time to let me know how I and anyone who listens to this can pray for you. We agreed when we started this that you and I would agree pray privately afterwards. So let's go ahead and draw this time to a close. Brothers and sisters who've listened at this time, I hope you've been blessed as I have to listen to Daniel talk about authentic Methodism and what the unique expression of Bulgarian Methodism looks like. I hope you do. As soon as this ends, choose to pray for the Bulgarian church that they have the strength and the courage and the boldness to be who God is requiring them to be in the present moment, that their partnership with the Mid-Texas Annual Conference is blessed with a healthy balance of help and accountability and support, and that you would give Daniel in particular, that God would give Daniel in particular the tools needed to get the job done. So God bless the Bulgarian church, and God bless you for spending time to learn about them. The integrity of the Global Methodist Church depends upon people making room in their hearts and minds for non-Americans. So God bless you for being authentically global Methodist, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, friends.